Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Costa Rica Crypto. Today I have the honor and the pleasure of speaking to Daniel and Andreas from EOS Metal. We're in the midst of doing something that is really kind of cool that I think is really important to the community. So I just wanted to welcome you guys and say hello. Thanks for taking the time to sit down and chat with me today. I guess to kind of kick things off, I'd love to know a little bit about your background, kind of where you guys came from, maybe where you grew up, and how you ultimately found your way to EOS.
Okay. I guess I'll start. Hello, guys. My name's Daniel Azor, and I have a background in healthcare IT. I actually first got into crypto around 2013, studying mining and adapting hardware to build out mining rigs. Ultimately, I didn't pursue it as far as I wish I had now. I went back into more traditional investments like Forex, and that's actually where I met one of our other founders. We were working on a Forex trading robot, actually. And we had some mild success, but we were fantastic at breaking even, which wasn't our goal. So, but at least we didn't lose our shirts. And but we both independently had interests in crypto. So our experience working together in Forex led us to pursue crypto together, and we had various discussions about different initiatives, possibly adapting our trading bot to the crypto markets, or providing utilities to the community as a paid service potentially. But it was really one of our founders, Jorge, that found EOS and really saw the potential in it and brought it to the rest of the group that ultimately founded us. So that's kind of how we found our way here.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. What about yourself, Andreas?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us, Matt. It's an honor. And regarding me, I grew up in Chile and I moved to Barcelona several years ago. I'm a software engineer. I've worked with several startups and involved in the technical side as well as the business to help them grow and scale in general. And I joined EOS Metal somewhat recently when starting the bond project, which we call Tungsten. And I got into EOS, I got into blockchain in general a couple of years ago. I was following it closely, and coincidentally, I also developed my own trading bots and algorithms. I did kind of well, but in the end, I was more looking into working on something that would provide some more real value to the community and in general, solve some problems instead of just trying to make money. And I realized, I was really interested in governance and in decentralization in general. And I found that EOS was basically the only platform that would allow me to build the kind of stuff that I was dreaming about building.
For sure. Very cool. And I think we're going to get into that. I think you've definitely found your cause. We're going to talk about Tungsten today here in a few minutes. And it's funny, I just, myself included, I can kind of relate to you, Daniel. Like if I only taken that plunge a little bit sooner, but it's cool. I've been doing it for a little while, not as long as yourselves, but it's just a wormhole. It's particularly EOS. You just get sucked in and you don't look back, and that's exactly what happened to me. I guess the next question is, obviously, of course, what kind of made you decide to announce candidacy as a BP? What brought everybody together to EOS Metal and ultimately led to the creation of EOS Metal?
Well, we identified the opportunity as a block producer pretty early on. We were already working together, as I mentioned, in Forex pursuits. We each individually had technology backgrounds and a large skill set in infrastructure. So the potential of DPoS and what EOS presented as a business opportunity for block producers just made sense. We had the infrastructure background, we had the understanding, we had the interest in crypto, and we really believed in both DPoS and EOS. So it was really a perfect marriage. We actually had pursued a larger team initially, but some of those individuals backed out, and it's actually a big benefit that it did. We were able to run a much more lean operation, have a lot less outside influence, and as a result, EOS Metal was born. And we started off with just 3 founders, all with either infrastructure or technical backgrounds, and put together a plan and started participating very early on in the Jungle testnet. And we have a pretty bullish outlook for the future of EOS, and we wanted to be a part of that right from the beginning as part of the launch group.
Yeah, it's funny. I always kind of say, at least to myself, that the universe tends to unfold exactly as it should, right? So it sounds like that was just kind of the perfect circumstance for EOS Metal. I guess like what everybody's wondering is ultimately like, what are your core values as a block producer? What are some of the things that EOS Metal believes in? What are you guys trying to accomplish? Like, what are your core values essentially?
Sure. Well, at our core, given our infrastructure background, we're dedicated to reliable and unbiased block production. We believe that that's a foundational aspect of what it is to be a block producer. By unbiased, I mean that we've taken a lot of care to not allow any potential outside influences. We're entirely self-funded right out of the pockets of the founders. All operations, all infrastructure, all hardware, and hosting, we've paid for right out of our pockets. And we planned that right from the beginning because we saw other organizations that did have outside influence, and we wanted to make sure that that wasn't a factor in any decisions we made at our most core foundational aspect, which is to provide unbiased blocks to the network. We have taken great care, because of our focus on infrastructure, to apply the best practices that were established by the launch group, such as firewalls, security features, DDoS protections, and even some more mundane aspects, but important, where we ensure we have scripts to monitor the network. Infrastructure is a real core aspect of what we do. From an operations perspective, we also take great care to maintain transparency. And that can be ambiguous. And I know some people question what is or isn't transparent for a BP, but for us, what that means is to maintain our commitments to everything in the BP agreement, the reg producer agreement, everything that's in the current constitution and any future constitution that's adopted by the community, as well as expectations that go beyond the constitution and the reg agreement, reg producer agreement, that are being established by the community. So we work very closely with a lot of groups that monitor and audit the BPs in various capacities, and we're pretty proud of the ratings that we've achieved from some of those individuals and groups.
Yeah, I have actually seen a recently circulating list, and I did see you guys on there doing quite well. I guess the next question is, what everybody wants to know is, we know kind of what your values are, what you do properly, but what ultimately makes you guys different from other BP candidates? How would you kind of describe that?
Well, given our focus on infrastructure, we set out from the very onset to implement bare metal servers. It's why we chose the name EOS Metal. We wanted to make it clear that that was a dedication to us and to represent our focus on infrastructure. We feel this provides the best performance and long-term scalability. And that might sound off because a lot of people understand the scalability of using cloud-based solutions, but when you look at the growth track of EOS and the future that Dan envisions, cloud computing won't support what the potential growth track of EOS is. And he's even talked about BPs having to operate their own data centers at some point once we scale to that point. So we believe dedicating to bare metal physical servers from the beginning was a key aspect. Now, what that doesn't mean is that we take any issue with other cloud resources used for the network or for block production. Rather, for us, it's a differentiator and something that's important for diversifying the network. I think a healthy network requires both cloud infrastructure as well as bare metal infrastructure. And we would like to see more bare metal in the top 21 as an example. Beyond just using physical servers, we also diversify geographically. So we host servers in multiple locations, multiple countries, careful to put ourselves across different geopolitical environments. So if one country should change their law or their outlook for crypto in the future, it will not impact our ability to still reliably produce blocks. So we're a multi-international environment at this point.
That's really cool. I mean, I like that concept, you know, being geo-strategic within the confines of one block producer definitely has its advantages, of course. And I loved your answer, very political and also very valid. I like the way that, and I agree with you, it would be nice to see some more bare metal out there, and you're kind of planning for the future. I get it. I understand it. I guess ultimately one of the reasons why we came across to talk today is that you guys are doing something that's very interesting, at least to me, and I think to a lot of the people out there. And you've created a proof of concept deapplication layer for governance, right? I guess my question based on that is, you know, why did you guys decide to create something like this? Why are you so passionate about it? And what problems could this potentially solve with the current state of governance?
So I'm going to take that. Basically, governance is really important because it is about how we decide what happens to us as a community and to our shared resources, and like what are the rules that govern us, and what's okay and what's not okay, and how we determine it. And the lack of a formal or well-established governance process in other blockchains has led them to stagnate and left them unable to adapt. And it's very important to know that the only thing that is constant is change, and that if you're not able to adapt, then in the marketplace you'll be left behind, but also you will have a lot of casualties in the sense of users that won't be satisfied with what was the outcome. And so in that sense, what we're doing well in EOS is that we already have a big focus from the start on governance, and so we're already way ahead in that sense compared to many other blockchains. But there are some shortcomings that need to be addressed. So we already have like good governance in the base layer that allows VPs the community to vote for VPs who will represent the will of the community in the governance process mostly of updating the software and implementing changes and basically adaptations to the changing needs. But there's a few issues. One shortcoming with this is that then you as a token holder need to trust that the rest of the community will unvote or will vote out a bad actor, a BP that is not doing what they should be doing. And we see this in some of the top BPs actually that are there, and they're missing blocks, or they're not even running a node. So it's this is some important things that need to be addressed. That's in the base layer, and then on top of that, you have that all the activity that happens in the network is mostly peer-to-peer between everybody that interacts with the smart contract or that creates a smart contract, and there can always be disputes. Either because the terms of the contract weren't met in what is not enforceable by the code. There are some. That's why we have recording contracts and we have intent of code, and so there are some things that the code won't be able to in a trustless way ensure that they'll happen. And so for this kind of clauses, it's important to be able to have arbitration and resolve the disputes in the subjective terms, or subjective clauses, or things that are not enforceable by code. And so for that is that we've been really working on this. We've been researching, and we've implemented some proof of concept, and we're looking for the community to get involved and get some feedback and see how we can take this to the next level and improve it and make it what it needs to be.
It's a great answer. Now I'm going to kind of throw a tough one at you, because let's get real here. Governance is not it's not a simple issue. But if, of course we've got, we've got guys who are very technical, hopefully watching, as well as people who are just getting into EOS itself. Like, this is a tough one to do, but if you were to try to explain this on a very basic level to somebody who's watching now, who has just kind of come into EOS, how might you do that? How might you break it down to somebody who's relatively new and maybe not so technical?
Okay, so in the way that we're conceiving the bond-based arbitration, you could see it as a kind of insurance that the person or the party that you're dealing with will actually follow through with their part of the deal, let's say, the contract that you're signing. And if they don't, you can easily just claim compensation for this. And without the intervention of the block producers, an arbitrator can already rule on your claim, and if it makes sense, then you will be compensated for the breach of contract or for the fraud or scam. A lot of things that are smaller than updating or upgrading the platform code of EOS or the system contracts. For all of that, you shouldn't need to require the BP's assistance. So for all of these things, you can just easily get compensated through the bond, and that also means that that arbitrators can operate in that layer instead of just for bigger disputes. Or there's a lot of interesting things that can be done. I'm not sure if that explains it very in simple terms.
It does. I'm going to take what you just said, and I'm going to try to kind of summarize it, and I'm going to shoot it back at you, and I want you to let me know if my interpretation is correct. Essentially, like on a very basic level, it is ensuring a better way of arbitration. So if somebody has an issue within the system, it's taking out some of the steps, some of the time, some of the money that might possibly need to be spent in order to get their issue resolved. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. So basically, for example, when you deposit your money in a bank and the bank has a banking license, then you know that even if the bank goes bankrupt, you will still keep your money. Like, you will be reimbursed for that. And in a way, that insurance is what gives you, the trust that you need to deal with that bank. So a similar thing can happen with every DApp, in which you are going to either deposit funds or interact with in a way that there's something at stake on your side. Then you can also know that there is something at stake on the other side.
That's perfect. I love that. I think that summary is very, very graspable. And I also think it's really interesting too. I guess the next question I want to ask you guys is, ultimately, you've kind of made a call out to the community as well as arbitrators and block producers to be involved in this thing. You want some community feedback. Why is that important, you guys?
Well, ultimately, Tungsten has a potential to impact all actors within the EOS space. So not just block producers or token holders, but also dApp developers, arbitrators themselves, and potentially any businesses that interact with EOS. So the concept of bond-based trust and accountability grows and becomes adopted. It has a potential to impact all of us. So becoming involved at an early stage is something that we really want to see the community take hold of and contribute to how bond-based governance is applied, so that we ensure that all voices are represented. For trust to be established and for such a governance effort to take hold, the entire community should have a voice and participate. I want to make it clear that we don't see this as EOS Metal applying a governance policy in any way. We are taking something that was inspired by Dan Larimer, figuring out how to technically implement it, and then using other BPs and members of the community to help fill it in and fill it out, so it becomes an open source tool that grows beyond just what we've implemented. We just kind of see ourselves as the catalyst for this.
For sure. It's funny you should say that, because when I was of course doing some research for our interview, I did go through your article, which I'm going to link to below. And one of the things that you state in there is that what Dan had intended might be a little bit different than what's going on right now. I guess, how would you kind of differentiate the intention of the intention of what was supposed to be created versus maybe kind of what's happening right now?
Mm-hmm. So regarding that, well, if you look at the history of how this thing kind of evolved since the mainnet launched, or even before, you could say, arbitration was touted as being the super extra cool feature that EOS would have that would fix a lot of the issues and disputes that are normal to happen, and so. It was originally conceived a bit more like a catch-all kind of thing, that everything could go to arbitration, that every DApp, every smart contract could define, okay, so this is the arbitration forum we use, and you can just file a claim there if you have an issue. But then it turned out that that wasn't exactly scalable, because then obviously with some examples of issues that happened in the mainnet of people being scammed or different kinds of situations, it showed that obviously, first of all, you can't bring everything to the ECAF. For example, if you get scammed, or if anything happens, like it's too slow of a process, it's too centralized. It would require as well BP intervention in order to actually enforce it, and if it wouldn't, then it would be extremely centralized in the arbitration forum, because if it would be automatically enforced, then it's worse than having a centralized government. And so obviously there's been some iterations about that. There's the new proposed version of the Constitution about making base layer arbitration be only about the intent of code, fixing contracts when there's bugs in them, or when they did something, they defrauded the users or things of that style, and then we, using bonds, like the community itself, can self-govern the arbitration process of disputes that are not related to necessarily the code.
So one of the things that I really, really like about EOS is that when something goes wrong that wasn't in the intent of the contract, that you can fix it. And that's one of the incredible things about this ecosystem. And it works. So I do enjoy that. I guess the next question I have for you is, ultimately, I want to talk a little bit about this bond-based arbitration. How exactly does that work with the idea of de-application governance? How does it all tie in together, and how do bonds kind of work within the system?
So in that sense, we could list a variety of interesting use cases where bonds can be applied. Specifically, as you're asking regarding the application level dispute resolution or arbitration, you could, when you as an application developer, you develop a smart contract, you could bind the Ricardian contract of your application to a bond that you would be creating in this bond system. And that means that you would deposit a certain amount of funds into this bond it would have, an expiration date and an appointed arbitrator. And so that would basically give your application the extra trust that might be needed for some of your users to use it and to interact with it, knowing that if something goes wrong, they have a way to be made whole, let's say. But you can also apply it to many other interesting things, like, for example, block producers themselves, who are basically, when you sign the rec producer agreement and you're registering as a block producer, you're supposed to, follow the clauses of this Ricardian contract. And we have some block producers who are not doing that. And you as a voter, you just have to trust that the bad actors are going to be voted out. But in reality, you could demand that block producers also put in a stake into a bond that is tied to their reg producer agreement, and that way you can trust that if they're not acting properly, then not only they will maybe be voted out, but also you can just file a claim, and the arbitrator will, if everything is in order, the arbitrator will grant it to you, and they will literally lose money by misbehaving.
It's good to have that kind of incentive and to tighten up the system a little bit and create a little bit more accountability and also access to that accountability. I understand what you guys have going on. Now, my next question I was going to ask, but it sounds like it's kind of redundant. So I was going to ask you about how the process of arbitration differs using tungsten. I believe we've kind of covered that, but if we haven't, just lop it into my next question if there's anything that I'm missing out on. I guess my next question is, you guys use a type of certification system, right? Like, how exactly does that work, and who provides the license?
We do eventually want to provide certification. The current implementation is basically permissionless and reputation-based, which means that any user can register as an arbitrator, and then it's up to the bond creators to pick who they want to use as their arbitrator. This is obviously subject to change because we want community input on how to standardize the arbitrator certification process. We want strong players that are dedicated to this process. What is very important, though, is that the arbitrators themselves also need to participate in the creation of those bonds on their own behalf to establish their own accountability and prevent any potential of arbitrators becoming bad actors. So we're looking for entrepreneurs that can be interested in investing in auditing both Ricardian and smart contracts, where they themselves would also need to raise a bond for dispute resolution and maintain a standard security level. This is an area that we're still expanding, and this is a good example of one of the places that we do want community feedback on what it looks like to have an arbitrator become certified or another body become certified.
Yeah, because related to that, I think that, looking into the future, if bond-based arbitration is adopted as we would expect it, then it would become very interesting as well in the sense of certifying the dApps themselves. Because we expect that there will be firms that will be dedicated to providing certification services for the auditing of smart contracts and Ricardian contracts, but also you could in a way certify when interact. Even maybe it's ambitious to think about it at this point, but I imagine, for example, when you use Scatter to interact with a application. Scatter could have a signal right there telling you, okay, this contract that you're interacting with is certified to have a bond that has a certain amount of funds that you would be able to claim if something goes wrong. So that can also give an extra layer of certification and trust to the users.
That's really cool. I think that's brilliant. I also think that's really interesting the way you guys have made the arbitrators put a little bit of skin in the game as well. And hopefully ultimately that's going to deter some of the bad actors. So it's cool. I like what you guys are doing. I think it's really interesting. I guess the next question would be, let's talk about lost and stolen keys. Like, how does Tungsten help mitigate the possibility of lost and stolen keys, or at least get involved in the process of potential compensation or whatever it might be should something go wrong?
So regarding that, there's actually, well, even Dan Larimer has spoken about this in the sense that obviously, I guess it depends in case by case about how your keys were stolen. But in the case of stolen keys, because you misplaced them or whatever, there's not really nobody has put a bond that where you can claim money if you lose your keys. So it doesn't kind of match in that sense, but it does. There are some ways in which this is, people are coming up with solutions. Like, for example, having, and this is what Dan Larimer suggested, is having a kind of bank contract where you could operate and transact with certain withdrawal delays, so that if it was a fraudulent transaction, it can be rolled back in a similar way that banks do. Or if you lost your keys, you can still recover them because everything is safe in the bank contract. Let's say if your funds are transferred away, they can still be transferred back, or you can be compensated. So I guess the bank contract itself could also have a bond that ensures the operation of the bank itself and so on.
It's a pretty cool idea. I'm liking what I'm hearing so far. I guess, of course, you're going to need a bunch of community support for this, right? You guys are doing this. This isn't something that you're doing for profit. This is something that you're doing for the betterment of the community and EOS. I guess one of my questions would be, have you guys received community support? I know you guys are working with some other VPs on this project. What's the response been, and who are some of the people that you have involved currently?
Well, the community outreach is still pretty young. We're developing it. We've created a Telegram channel specifically for the Bond project, and that's different from EOS Metal. We want that as a community to grow again to a larger community beyond just any single VP. We're actively working with articles and information and outreach to try to get the community more aware of what this Bond project is, how it is different from what they're used to, and try to get better understanding. Beyond that too, just from a technical aspect, we do have some VPs that we're partnered with either as true partners or advisors to the program. Crypto Lions we're working with, EOS Titan, EOS Shenzhen are some of the ones that we've announced our partnerships with. There's a few other VPs as well that we have more informal relationships with that are contributing ideas or having discussions with. Ultimately, though, we want more, not just VPs, but also more actors from the community. We recently invited Fuzzy, one of the big community participants, to join the channel and give some guidance on on-chain forums, because that's going to be an aspect of how we manage the interaction with the bond contract. So we're looking for more people to get involved, and we really, again, kind of see ourselves as the catalyst and kind of guiding this, but we'd like to see it take on something larger. We do have an open source GitHub as well, so all of this can be accessed as we're working on it. In fact, we've already gotten some good feedback from someone who audited our code and caught something that we needed to improve, and we were actively doing that. So we hope that activity continues.
100%. So it sounds like you've got a lot of support. Now I'm going to be the devil's advocate because I like to do that. I like to throw those little curveballs. Let's talk about criticisms. Have you had anybody who's heard about Tungsten who's said, like, this won't work? Or maybe somebody who's heard about Tungsten and kind of, you spoke about somebody kind of allowed you or gave you an idea to change the code, but what have some of those criticisms been, and what would you say to anybody who might not be comfortable with the concept or might not understand the concept or might have objections to it?
Well, first and foremost, if you don't understand, we welcome you to come and participate in the discussion. either by reaching out to us directly or going to our bond channel is probably the best location to have the debate. We have very open debates, even amongst our own team publicly, so that people can see what thought processors are going into the development and the ideas that are developing this. And the more people that participate in that, the better the outcome is going to be. And as far as criticisms go, we welcome those openly. They help us build a better and stronger product. There are things that we're going to miss, and there are ideas out there that may be better than our own, and we're not shy about incorporating those. As you highlighted as well, someone pointed out something in the code that should have been done a different way or could have been improved. We responded to that and we're acting on it. So that's exactly the kind of interaction we want, because we're not perfect and we might not think of all angles. So we want that higher level of participation in order to figure out what, some people thought wasn't realistically able to be implemented. We took that challenge on and wanted to see, well, if you did, how would you do it? And that's kind of how we birthed Tungsten and how we got to this point. But now it's going to take a lot broader community to develop that further. One of the biggest criticisms we've had has been related to opportunity costs. And some of the solutions we're looking at to try to resolve that, we're looking at either staking or bond sharing, potentially licenses, to gain additional trust. But this is one of the things that we really need to discuss even more with the community to figure out all the different angles that could be an issue. By and large, I think the biggest challenge is not really a criticism, it's helping people understand bonds in a more simplistic term, because it is somewhat of an ambiguous concept, and hopefully this video will even help with that even more.
I think you've done it. Honestly, that's why I kind of always try to break things down. If I could understand it, anybody can understand it. No, I'm kidding, of course, but no, I think that it's pretty digestible. And some of the analogies that you've kind of provided about the bank hit home with me, and I think they'll hit home with a lot of other people and help them realize how important this could be. One of the things that first struck me when I went through and I read that article, and of course, guys, I'm going to link to your group. I'm going to link to the EOS Metal Telegram, as well as the discussion channel for Tungsten, and all of your other posts and that kind of thing. So you'll be able to find them in the video below. But the one thing that really struck me about this is that I had the impression that this might be the kind of thing that if we can roll it out and kind of bring it to fruition, that might ultimately encourage commercial investors, which is really the whole point of EOS, right? Built for commercial scale. I guess, do you think that that's accurate? Do you think it could potentially break down some of the walls or some of the insurity for larger entities to come and begin to use the platform? I think it could be a benefit.
Absolutely. I mean, by having various actors not only have skin in the game, but the people like arbiters that would enforce any actions against them also having skin in the game, it's the best way of creating a trustless environment across a human element. And the more trust that's established through that process, the easier it would be for larger companies to trust a block producer is going to do the right thing because they have skin in the game, or an application developed by a developer is going to be doing the right thing because they have skin in the game as well. Even larger actors and larger corporations, the more they're interacting with EOS, the more sense it makes for them to put in a robust bond to show that they have longevity and interest in the future of not only EOS, but how they're interacting with it. So it really kind of covers the full spectrum of actors within the network. I mean, imagine something like the Google Store having a verified app that was verified by an auditor that has a bond. And if something happened with that app on the Google Store and you lost funds, you could not only potentially go after that app if they have a bond, you could also go after the firm that certified that application And the arbiters would be managing that on your behalf and ruling on it, where you can trust that arbiter because they also have skin in the game. So it really creates an interesting dynamic where it bridges that gap of, what's technically trustless with what is the human element of what could be trustless.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a step in the right direction towards adoption because, of course, people need to be able to trust the system to create adoption, right? A bunch of people aren't going to sink money into something that can potentially tarnish their reputation. And it sounds like this is kind of a step in that right direction by creating, as you said, just a little bit of accountability on all sides. So,
right. And just to add, I mean, if you're going to be doing substantial business on the network, it's in your interest to develop not only a bond, but a sizable bond. The more you're interacting, the more you're expecting to gain from the EOS system, the more you should be encouraged to put something substantial into the bond that shows the community that you are, holding yourself accountable on their behalf, basically.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's needed. It's definitely needed, and I think it would be a benefit to the system overall. I guess, in a perfect world, and maybe this is kind of this might be a silly question, I don't really know, but what would you love to see, like the future of tungsten? Of course, you want to see it developed, you want to see community input, you would love to see it implemented, right? But where does this end up in kind of maybe like 2 years in an ideal world?
There's actually something that we're looking forward to doing is as soon as the code stabilizes and we have we're going to be testing on Jungle first. We're going to be trying to improve the functionalities with the community feedback. But as soon as we have a good working version that we would deploy to the mainnet and that people would start using, we are looking forward to putting our own bond, EOS Metal, to ensure that we are respecting our reg producer agreement and that we are held accountable for our actions. We want to be the first user, basically. That's in the shorter term, let's say, medium. But in the longer term, I think that that if bond-based arbitration gets adopted as we would expect it, we want the community input to make sure that this is future-proof. We're developing this mainly initially right now to solve the needs that the community has right now in terms of faster dispute resolution, transparency, and trust. But we also want this to be future-proof and hopefully become the standard of how bond-based arbitration is done in the EOS network, and to be also compatible with the, for example, Dan Larimer's vision for these new proposals that he's coming up with, where bonds would play a central part in this. If that gets adopted as well, we would love for Tungsten to be the implementation of bonds that will be central to that vision. So there's a lot of interesting things that this can enable, and we're looking forward to see what happens.
100%, guys. The thing that always kind of strikes me is it's not like you guys are doing this for profit or for money. You're doing it to better the ecosystem, and it's a really great idea. I had a grasp of it before we talked, but now I think you've pretty much nailed it down, and I think it's a great idea. So I really do hope that people will check out the links that I post below. Of course, Telegram is the hub of where kind of everything happens with EOS. So I do recommend, of course, that people go in and have a chat with you guys. You're super approachable, and read some of these articles and take a look at what you guys are doing, because I think that it's important, and I think that it needs to be done, and I appreciate the idea. I'm going to let you guys go so you can go and continue to work on what you're working on, but I want to just kind of, are there any final thoughts or words that you might have for people of the EOS community before I allow you guys to go off and try to change the ecosystem, or enhance it rather than change it?
Sure, I'll start that off. I would just encourage you guys that if you have block producers you support, or you're a developer yourself, or you have interest in being one of these people that could potentially certify applications or be an arbiter, or even an actor that we haven't thought of yet, if you see a way that you could contribute to this, we'd encourage you to participate, because I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And ask those groups that you support to also support bonds. If you believe in this, it's important that other actors, VPs, developers understand that this is something that you as a community member support and see as a good way of introducing transparency and accountability to the network. So we encourage you not just to participate with us as a community in getting the word out, but also encourage those people you work with to participate. As Andres mentioned, we are excited to be the first group to put a bond out there as soon as we have a production implementation. And we stand by that because we believe in this as a future. So we hope other VPs follow in that. We hope developers follow with that, and it soon becomes the standard.
Brilliant, guys.
I would add that, I mean, in my personal view as well, I mean, objectively, the blockchain is us, like the users. It only has value because we're using it. And from that point of view, I think that the future is bright, and there's so many possibilities that we can build on top of this. And from that point of view, considering all the apathy and frustration that exists towards traditional governments in each of our countries, I think it's a good chance for us to actually, get your hands dirty and participate in the discussion and try to contribute and make this into the best that it can be. Like, let's do it well this time, So, yeah, that's my invitation to people.
It's the community's opportunity to build something better.
I love it. I love it. I think it's well put. I understand that ultimately it could be a bridge for a little bit of security for some of the bigger companies to come in and have some skin in the game. And of course, have a little bit more confidence with the system, not to say that they don't have it now, but just have more confidence in the sense that that it makes arbitration a little bit more accessible to everybody, and just kind of delays some of the issues that might occur, and just puts a little bit more trust in the system. So I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. This has been a really enlightening conversation, for myself included. I wish you guys nothing but the best, and I hope that we can sit down here in the near future and we can kind of chat about updates. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure as well.
Likewise, thank you so much, and we'd love to come back and give you guys an update, maybe even a demo.
Sounds great. Anytime you guys are ready. We will talk to you guys soon, and thanks so much.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.